All right, so welcome everyone. Again, my name is Keyona Saquile Lazenby. I'm a first-year doctoral student here at the GTU. My research interests include ecowomanism, African cosmologies, and crossroad anti-ecology. I have a master's in social transformation and Certificate of Women Studies in Religion from PSR and GTU. I'm also an ordained interfaith minister and the founder of Blessed is She, which is a women's interfaith ministry based here in the Bay Area. So let me introduce the artist a little bit before we pull up his work. Paul Lewin, he's Jamaican born in Oakland. He was born in Jamaica and now he's an Oakland-based artist. His father was an artist as well as a storyteller, and he grew up assisting his father with various creative projects. Throughout his father's storytelling, he often told stories about ancient societies, science, and history, and he took an interest in all of that, as well as sci-fi and fantasy art. He started his own drawing his own personal works using a pen and paper was his choice of medium. He admitted, he dabbled a little bit with graffiti art, and he admitted that he wasn't a very good graffiti artist, but what graffiti taught him was how to go with the flow and how to use movement in his work. In 1994, he picked up a paintbrush and he began painting. Today, his work is focused on African Caribbean and African folklore, as well as nature and sci-fi. All his paintings tells a story that dates back to ancient African societies and includes the work of the ancestors. That's a very important point. And he intentionally creates alternative works that draws on these subjects, like ancestors, ancient ancestors, and interdimensional ancestors, and all the other things and beings that inhabit spirit and from the spirit world. And he's inspired through his work. He meditates on concepts, and then he allows space for whatever that comes. So we're going to start with the first piece. Lydia's going to pull up the screen. It's called Emerge. Okay. Now, to give a little focus and context about this work, I'm a self-identified eco-womanist. And I identify as an eco-womanist is because I live at the intersection of race, class, gender, and earth justice. Now, spiritually, not only am I am an ordained interfaith minister, I'm also grounded in the African spiritual Isheshe tradition, Ifa, which comes out of West Africa. Okay, so I'm going to define these things a little bit. So African cosmology, I'm going to start there, because Ifa, the spiritual tradition of Ifa, it falls under the umbrella of African cosmology, right? And so in African cosmology and Ifa, we perceive, conceive, and contemplate the universe and the lens in which we see reality, which affects our value systems and our orientations. And we also view everything, all life forms, as being interconnected. And so I'm going to share a little bit more about that as we move through the painting. So that's kind of like a general definition of African cosmology. Now, for ecowomanism, we center the perspectives of women of African descent, and we reflect upon these women's activist methods, religious practice, and theories on how to engage earth justice, right? Now, ecowomanism came out of the third wave of womanism, where we engage religious thought, and we also, our worldviews are shaped on or based on African cosmologies, and we work to uphold the moral imperative for earth justice, right? As well, in eco-womanism methodology and philosophy, we link the divine, human, and natural realms into an interconnected web of life. Eco-womanism takes into account the religious practices and spiritual beliefs that are important tenets and points of inspiration or each an eco-womanist activist, right? So I'm all about justice overall. Okay. So this Emerge painting, I want to introduce the African cosmological tradition of Ifa, okay? So this painting depicts the connection between heaven and earth, right? And what we see at the crown of the woman's head, that's the sun, is the sun that backs her, and her head is also connected to the heavens, right? At her feet, if you look towards the bottom of the painting, that circle is the earth, right? So her physical body is the connection between the heavenly realm and the earthly realm, right? So now I'm going to use some beautiful words here to kind of to ground us, orientate us, right? So heaven and Ifa, right? So let me say this: the language in which we communicate our rituals and our prayers and any kind of initiation and divination is Yoruba, right? So it's imperative or important that we learn or we speak the Yoruba language, okay? So that's the first thing, please keep that in mind. So our word for heaven is Orun, and our word for earth is Onile, okay? So this woman's physical body, this Black woman's physical body, is a connection between heaven as well as earth, okay? Now, within the painting itself, so in Ifa, okay, hello? If I can hear someone have a little background, could you please mute your phone if possible, or your computer? Thank you, okay. So the creator of not only our universe, as well as all the universes that exist in the world, is a feminine deity or feminine spirit, Akamara, right? And then within our own universe, Earth, our name for the supreme being is Oludumare, and Oludumare is both a masculine and a feminine deity. And Oludumare's praise name is Edumare, right? So we have various deities that represent not only the elements, the earth elements, they also represent spirits. So we have Orunmila, who's a diviner, meaning performs divination, right, for us. We have Egun, who are our ancestors, and we have our Orishas, who we work with a lot, that are our deities. So within this painting, you see depictions of the Orisha deities. So before I go into a little bit of that, I want to provide just more context about Ifa. So the spiritual tradition of Ifa, right, it was birthed in West Africa, Nigeria specifically, right? However, through the slave trade, in which Africans were enslaved and brought to different parts of the world, they held on to their spiritual traditions, and it was renamed, right? So, and not only was these spiritual traditions renamed, they also took on elements of other traditions that were common or indigenous to that area. For instance, okay, so we know Ifa is the center that derives out of Nigeria or West Africa. So when Africans were enslaved and brought to Cuba, they held on to their tradition, and then they added other Christian elements from their slave masters, and they created a tradition that's derivative of Ifa named Lukumi, right? In Brazil, when Africans were enslaved and brought to Brazil, you have the religion of Ifa, and then you combined it with the indigenous traditions of Brazil at that time, which are kind of sort of native, right? And with some Christian elements because of slavery, and the name is Candomblé. In Puerto Rico, you have Santeria. So what enslaved Africans did in Santeria, they took the Catholic deities and who had similar attributes to the Orishas out of Nigeria, and they renamed them. They still worship them through the Catholic saints because that was the only way they can worship their tradition freely, right? So Santeria is a mixture of Ifa as well as Catholicism. In Trinidad, you have Shango Baptist, and Shango is an Orisha we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute. In Jamaica, you have Obia. In Haiti, you have Wudun. And for those who landed in the American South, you have what's called Hoodoo, okay? Now, this painting holds a lot of spiritual meaning, okay? So let's talk about the Orishas that are in the painting. So each Orisha, now Orisha are spiritual deities, again, that are represented by the elements, okay? And they hold certain powers. So, for instance, for the watcher that you see in the painting, it represents either the female deity Oshun or the female deity Yemoja, right? Oshun represents love, fertility. She's a warrior, and she's also a diviner. Yemoja represents motherhood, prosperity, and she's the caregiver of the village, okay? Oya represents the air and the wind. She's the gatekeeper between life and death. You have Shango, who represents fire, and he also represents the element of thunder, okay? Oh yeah, and Oya, she represents hurricanes and tornadoes as well. And so you have a Shu, whose deity, now he's the deity that is petitioned before all the other deities, and he opens all the roads in which someone travels on spiritually, okay? Now, in this tradition, we have Ewe, which are herbs that we use to perform rituals. We have Aleke, sacred beads that we wear if we are initiated to a certain deity. And we also have Ides, which are bracelets or anklets that we wear if we are initiated to certain deities. Okay, any questions so far? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. I had a couple questions. First, what's the medium of the painting? Is it acrylic or oil, or?
I believe it's acrylic.
It looks like acrylic.
Yes.
And when you're speaking about the belief system, is this the artist's belief system, or is this your interpretation of the painting?
Well, in his interviews, he speaks to how his paintings represent African spiritual traditions. So this is my take. Yeah.
Okay. And
yes.
When I look at the painting, I see male and female elements, and I see a lot of sort of roundnesses, which might be, you know, pregnancy and fertility, and I see a lot of sort of sneaky images that might be male. And I'm wondering, are those reflected in the African tradition that you're talking about as well?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. That's a really good question, because I forgot to mention that African deities can be both masculine and feminine. So you have an African deity, and they can have a masculine road or a feminine road. So that's accurate in your assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions on this portrait? Okay, wonderful. Let's move on to the next portrait, Sacred. This is one of my favorite portraits. Yeah, it's an acrylic on canvas. So this one has lots of beautiful, vibrant colors. As we can see, this woman is backed by the sun. And here we're going to talk a little bit about the rituals in African, in Ifa, okay? So We have what's called a goon. So this woman, so in the portrait, let me just name, right? We have the Egun, which are the ancestors. We have children whom we call Omo, and children always represents the past, present, and future. We have masquerades. Those are living spirits that can be the ancestors or a spirit that just haven't ascended to heaven or a place under the earth, right? We have animals that are present. We have trees, we have water, and we have food. Now, I chose this specific painting to talk about what's going on in the world from an eco-womanist perspective, right? We have children who are not being taken care of, who are locked in cages, right? We have animals that are facing extinction. We have trees and waters that are affected by climate change. And we have food, the semblance of food, and that deals with famine, poverty, and hunger, okay? And these are all environmental justice issues that are on the radar of those who are involved in environmental justice work, okay, Ecowomanism. So let's talk a little bit about the village woman that we see present there, right? She uses a lapa or wrap, which is a piece of fabric to tie the baby, to secure her baby on the back. The child is holding an umbrella, and he or she is also wearing masquerade glasses to announce itself as a spirit. So more than likely, the child itself is an ancestor, okay? Now, you have the elder woman who the village woman, is holding up in a bowl filled with food. And so the village woman is showing her reverence to this elder woman. Now, in our spiritual traditions, elders are very, very important, and they are sacred. And we always seek them out for counsel, okay? And so in this picture, you see families, you see a community, and you see the exchange of caregiving. All right? And when I think about this picture, I see spiritual healing and spiritual restoration. So there could be numerous ceremonies or rituals going on in this picture, right? So for us, when a child is born, every child has a naming ceremony. So a divination is performed. And a divination is a reading by someone who's gifted in the spiritual art of divination, meaning they can read cowrie shells, they can read coconut shells, and they can read palm nuts, okay? That's very important. Now, then a child, when it's older, they receive what's called an asetaye, and that's a child reading to show who they are, who they came to be in the world. Then you have an ita before you go through any of your initiations. And then you also learn about spiritual baths, head cleansing, cleansing of your aura, cleansing of your spirits. You learn about any spiritual gifts that you may have. You learn about any divine assignments you may have that you come to the world to complete, as well as your divine purpose, okay? Now we give offerings before we go, so before we petition any of the orishas, okay? The offerings can be food, it can be water, it can be alcohol, and we do participate in animal sacrifices as well, okay? And so you can either give a sacrifice, which is something that is asked of you, or you can give an offering, which is something that you want to give, okay? So there are different levels of initiations, and there are different levels of just how you walk your road in the tradition, depending on who your orisha is. So I want to go back a little bit to I want to talk a little bit more about just what's going on in the world, and to tie it into what's going on in this picture. Like before, we spoke about famine, poverty, hunger. We talked about just how our water source is being depleted, or it's being poisoned. Flint, Michigan, for example, climate change and trees and the fires that are happening here in California, the extinctions of animals that are happening around the world, and just what's going on in our children, and even COVID, how COVID-19 is an environmental justice issue, and how there hasn't been a proper response in the United States to get this virus under control. All right, any questions? Yes. No, it's all good, Katie. Yeah.
So I'm looking at the scenery, and that looks like West Africa. You know, the shape of the huts and the shapes of the trees, but you have a totem pole, which is a, you know, Northwest American thing. And the umbrella almost looks Chinese. So it's an interesting mix. Does the artist talk at all about what his, I guess, cultural inspirations are?
Well, he definitely, he always says that his cultural inspiration is African folklore, African Caribbean folklore, and just ancient societies from around the world. So, and what's interesting is that some of the elements that appear here, when you, like for instance, when I traveled to Nigeria, Africa, like some things that are present or seen publicly about Nigeria, when you travel to what they call the bush, like the inner Nigeria in the country where societies or villages or towns are not heavily affected by the Western world, you'll see some of the same elements there as well.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I've seen these, I've traveled quite a bit in West Africa, well,
okay,
throughout Africa, but that hut, you know, that's the standard hut, right? It's the one you see everywhere. And it's actually incredibly comfortable because all the coolness is in there, you know?
Exactly, yes.
It's like the only place you want to be on a hot day. But it just seems odd because first, I mean, they're generally kind of large. And the totem pole is so much larger than it is. And I'm just sort of, I don't know. It's an interesting combination of cultural elements.
Yes, yes. So I wanted to share that I chose this painting as well for spiritual restoration. And when I said that Ecowomanism and African cosmologies could help to make a better world, is that I believe that whatever your spiritual religious tradition is, you know, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, you practice another indigenous tradition of a specific land, that we're all interconnected, right? There's no separate, we're all one in spirit, right? We're all one. And I believe that we're called spiritually, as the Ecowomanist, that we're called spiritually to help address these issues, whether it's through policy, through organizing, through activism, but it's definitely work that needs to be done to address, you know, just some of these environmental issues plaguing the world. Yes, I don't know what happened. Do we have any other questions?
So does the artist have a book or a gallery or other places?
Yeah, yes, so he shows quite often all over the world. I'm going to type in the chat box his website. And I own quite a few of his pieces.
Nice. Yeah, because I want to show some people this. This is really cool stuff.
All right, so for just what I spoke to briefly about Ecowomanism, does anyone have any questions about Ecowomanism?
It's probably not the kind of thing that you can sum up in a few sentences, but do you want to give a sort of broad outline of what particular aspects of that you're interested in?
Sure. So my research, I want us to begin to look at Mother Earth as an oppressed entity. Similarly, how we say white supremacy has oppressed like people, and it's an institution in and of itself, you know, and it's through the establishment of systemic racism. I also want to call in and to recognize that through environmental injustices, that Mother Earth herself is an oppressed entity, and what can we do about it? Mm-hmm. And though it's not depicted here, I've conducted a lot of research on carceral anti-ecology. And so the prison industrial complex in itself is a triple threat environmental justice issue. Because not only does it harm people, land, and nature, and all prisons and jails are very, very toxic. And so I conducted a lot of research and scholarship around carceral anti-ecology. And so I do that through a womanist lens. Yes.
I'm glad somebody's doing that.
and say a bit about womanist.
Okay, so womanist, for those who don't know, womanist is a term coined by Alice Walker. And she says perfect womanist to feminist is like purple is to lavender, so it's of the same family. So womanism, though the term was coined by Alice Walker, it actually was birthed in the academy. I'm very specific with my language. It was birthed in the academy at Union Theological Seminary in New York with Dr. Jacqueline Grant, Dr. Katie Cohn, may she rest in peace, and Dr. Dolores Williams. And so they wanted to use a methodology that focused on, that was, because they felt at the time that Black liberation theology only focused on Black men. And so they wanted to create a methodology that also looked to the experience of Black women. So it included the whole family, and they wanted to move beyond race to incorporate a class analysis as well as a gender analysis. And through this third wave of womanism, we now have eco-womanism, where we're looking at earth justice as well. Yes. Any other questions around my research? Ecowomanism, African cosmology, carceral anti-ecology.
I'm totally happy that you're doing the ecology thing with regard to incarceration, because every time I go in and they have dinner and there's these mounds of throwaway, everything is throwaway, you know, and it's because it's easy and secure, and it's just horrifying, you know. But in the mounds of horrifying things that are in that space, that little piece doesn't ever seem to get addressed. So I'm glad you're thinking about it.
Right. Do you know, it was only until recently, and it's still very loosely, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, just the toxics that are produced in and by prisons, they're loosely regulated. And so you have, so you have not only people that are housed in those institutions that are dying, and the surrounding communities and people that work there as well. It's really, really sad.
Oh yeah,
it's really sad.
Yeah, it's been very ugly. I think yes. Mary had another question.
Yes. Mary, did you have another question? Can you hear us?
Well, I was interested in your research because it sounds as though you have been to Nigeria and I would take it to the Caribbean and
yes.
Well, where are the places that you are looking now in terms of where there is activity going on with this that also intersects with the art?
Mm. In West Africa, what I find, what I have found throughout my travels, specifically in Africa and then all over the world, actually Asia and the Caribbean as well, spirituality is art and art is spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So it just is, right? And whereas, yes, you know, in my spiritual tradition, we do have temple, or we do have places where we go to worship. And we believe that your sanctuary, your temple is right where you are. Okay. And so it's, you can see it's reflected in the buildings and the paintings and the sculptures and the ground in in their homes and just in the community as well. Art is very, very prevalent, and it's to believe to be an extension of spirit. Art is. It's a way to communicate with spirit, whether it's through paintings, drawings, music, sound itself, just various artistic mediums. Spirit speaks. Yes.
I was curious if your work goes into law at all, and concepts of control or ownership versus, I mean, what is the relationship with the earth?
Well, the earth is sacred. And not only a part of my research, scholarship, and activism is working with, let me be clear, established organizations that are already doing the work, that are already doing the work around earth justice. So we can take a look at the policies that exist that needs to be changed. We can take a look at just what we can do individually and collectively to heal the earth. Yes.
Have you worked at all with what's called the public trust doctrine, that some things are so important for shared use, it can't be treated as private property?
No, I haven't, but you said it's the public trust doctrine?
Yeah, it's a long-standing tradition in the West.
Okay.
And the Academy has been trying to make it disappear. And it, you know, there's been quite a movement against it. But there's a new resurgence of it. And it's originally applied to the navigable waters, that, you know, that there's some things not even the king or the emperor could sell or give away. They were held in trust for the public, and future generations are explicitly protected. And California has a very strong public trust. And anyway, I've had a lot of tension with the environmental justice community, because they say that environmental justice started in some toxic situation in the South in the late 1980s, and it didn't exist before then. But obviously it has, in both religion and law. And anyway, it's when did this begin? I mean, when in relation to time, are you taking part in a story that's going on forever, or did it begin in a certain place?
Well, I believe that it just always was, because let's think about the indigenous people to this land and the relationship that they have to nature and to animals and to the elements, and how just even in Oakland, just the city of Emeryville was built on sacred land that was indigenous to the people here. And so I believe that it always existed. Now, has it always been what would be considered mainstream, meaning that it got the attention of the academy or the attention of the public? I think it's probably relatively recent, but no, because based on my research, when I think about the 1920s and 30s, when this lady, her name was Mama Hazel, when she did work around the chemical plants that was causing cancer in various Chicago as well as Southern communities. So I think it's been around for a while, and I think people begin to organize it, not recently, but not in the not so far past, begin to organize around it. But I do believe that the indigenous people of this land and then in other lands always had a sacred relationship with the earth, and they always protected the earth and the animals. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, does anyone else have any other questions for Keyona? Thank you so much for sharing. Oh, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Really a question. I would just say that I really, it's a good thing I had my mute on, because as you were going through describing the images, I was like, so it was really fun for me, because this is new to me, to just follow along with what you were saying. So it was fascinating, and I appreciate the way that you were able to do that for the uninitiated. And then just you're very good at giving your definitions of, womanism, and, talking about the, Mother Earth as, this needing protection. So that was I appreciated that. I enjoyed that. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm definitely going to use some of your images as a focus for theological reflection when I can get back in jail.
You're right.
I've been locked out.
Yes.
Back. Anyway, but a lot of times I'm looking for images like this that really inspire somebody and get their heart and their ideas going of what's in this. And these images are wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, I've also used the images. I've taught comparative religions at community colleges, and I've used some of these images, and I asked, according to your spiritual religious tradition, pick out the elements that are in your sacred text or that are a part of your tenets. And it's really, really interesting. And what do you think about it? Why is water sacred to you? Why are trees sacred to you? Why is food sacred to you? Why should you protect the earth? So it's quite interesting. Yeah, it's really great images to use.
Yeah, no, definitely. This is a wonderful set of images.
Hi, yeah, I would just like to add, the images are so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing the website. I work primarily with youth, and so I really look forward to exposing them to this beautiful and help to kind of foster their creativity. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here, Reverend Amy.
Hello. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get here to see most of it. Will you have an abstract or some way, a transcript of something that so we can dive deeper into the subject?
I will say that this is being recorded right now, this whole talk, so it will be up on the YouTube page.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I had some internet problems, so I had to kind of go around the back door to get this. So thank you. I really admire what I've seen, just a little bit. It's amazing work.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. All right. So if there's no more questions or comments or responses, Lydia, back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Keyona. This was a really fantastic evening. I think we all learned a great deal, and yeah, it's given, I think, the idea of having these art breaks is, we've all had our busy days, and it's just nice to sort of look at something completely different and think for a minute about not what's going on in the world. So thank you so much for giving us that little moment of solace. I think we all probably needed it. So with that being said, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a blessed Thanksgiving weekend, not this weekend, but next one. And be well.
Set more
Everybody
of these
take care.
up. We want more of these.
Yeah, keep your eyes out. We'll have 3 more talks next semester too, with a whole new lineup of people. So
Yes.
look
Good
forward to
stuff.
that.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.